Hello, my socially awkward friends. Welcome back to Creating Crime Time. I'm your host, Liz, and today's story is a little bit more old school than last week. So last week, we talked about the Smutty Nose murders. This week, we're going to talk about a young girl named Hannah Ocuish. Now, this case is in Connecticut, and also the time being 1786. That's why I meant we're kicking it old school. So, welcome to Creating Crime Time. All right, now just to start with a little bit of a backstory. Now, Hannah Ocuish was born in March 1774 in Connecticut, and she was a part of the Pequot Native American tribe. And it is also to be known that she had an intellectual disability. So she didn't she wasn't on everybody's same level, if you will. And also, just a little fun fact, she's believed to be the youngest person executed in the United States. So, this case is between Hannah Ocuish and a 6-year-old named Eunice Bowles. Now, Eunice Bowles is the daughter of a wealthy farmer in New London, Connecticut. So, what is said is that Hannah and Eunice basically fought over strawberries. Now, this is the dumbest thing and dumbest... it was mind-blowing reading this. Like, literally, a girl died over strawberries. But that's what has always been told in regards to this story. Now, the murder itself was reported on July 27th, 1786. Because it was put on the newspaper, which was called the Norwich Packet. Now, the only evidence that they had against Hannah was an alleged confession that was given to the people that investigated the crime. And before her alleged confession, apparently 4 boys were seen near the crime scene. So it's not even definitive whether or not she actually committed this crime. It could have been they pinned it on her instead of who actually killed poor 6-year-old Eunice. And also during her trial, this worked against her it literally worked against her in her favor. She was so unfazed and calm that it was mind-blowing to everybody else that was there for her trial. And even the judge was baffled by the way she was acting. It was very, very strange. But we still don't know if she actually killed her. I mean, she was executed, so they found her guilty, but it's kind of like a little bit of a case of hearsay. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to read you what kind of describes the case in itself and who they pointed the fingers to. So, on the 21st of July, 1786, around 10 o'clock in the morning, the body of a murdered child was found at a public road leading from New London to Norwich, lying with its face near a wall. The neighborhood turned out to hunt for the murderer, and Hannah was questioned and claimed that she had seen 4 boys near the scene of the crime. When a search failed to turn them up, she was brought in and interrogated again, then taken to the Bowles home to be charged with homicide in the presence of the dead child. So they literally brought her to the residence of Eunice and her parents and charged her with the murder of Eunice in front of a dead body. Obviously, that's how they used to do funerals. If you didn't know that, that's what your like parlor room was for. Hence why it's called a funeral parlor. You had a parlor room in your house, which was your formal sitting room. That way you could host your family's funerals in your house. Sorry, I'm a little bit of a morbid person. I hope you understand. But when they charged her with the murder, she burst into tears and apparently confessed. This is the alleged confession that they're talking about. And 5 weeks earlier, Eunice reported that Hannah was stealing fruit during the strawberry harvest, and Hannah plotted revenge. So this is where fingers were automatically already pointed towards Hannah, is that Eunice talking about her stealing fruit like way before her murder. And then they believe that now, since Hannah, she's plotted this revenge, she caught sight of Eunice headed for school, and she lured her from the path with a gift of calico and then beat and choked her to death. Now, if you don't know what calico is, it's unbleached cotton. And obviously fabric back then was kind of like few and far between. If you think about it, this is like right after the revolution. Like, they don't have all their supplies. All these areas are not very well built up to what we would expect them to be. So calico is something that's highly like wanted and desired. And especially if you're a 6-year-old girl, granted, yes, her family is wealthy, but still, having some nice, super nice woven calico was harder to come by back then. I personally, when I first found this case, I was very confused because it's a 12-year-old girl that is found guilty and executed. And what I read in regards to her actual execution and the way people dealt with her, I was very to other homes at a very young age to work as a servant. Now, obviously, she's a Native American. She's working as a servant in a white family's home. So the theme is kind of like a slave killing a wealthy white girl. It's a little bit of a precursor to what we have read about where it comes to slavery and servants killing their masters and stuff like that. So this is very disheartening to even come across. And also, at the age of 6, Hannah was accused of beating a white child and trying to steal her necklace. So everything kind of from early in childhood has been brought to the forefront, so people believe that she is a bad girl. Now, obviously, I don't know what she's like. This was in 1700s, so I can only give my opinion on what I read. And from what I read, if there's multiple different things, like a theory of maybe she was coerced into saying that she was guilty and saying that she killed her. I don't know. Maybe she was innocent and they just pinned it on her. It's all possible. But yeah, it's very strange. So on July 21st, 1786, somebody found Eunice Bull's body on the side of the road. Now, if you are highly squeamish, you might want to just skip over this part. But her corpse displayed signs of extreme trauma. The head and the body were mangled in a very shocking way. The back and one arm were broken, and a number of heavy stones were placed on the body, arms, and legs. Now, this is another thing that I have an issue with. If it's a young girl that's that killed this 6-year-old, a 12-year-old girl. I'm sorry, most 12-year-olds are not strong. So she would either A, need a lot of help to put the stones on, or she just clearly didn't do it. Because if I'm thinking about big stones, a 12-year-old girl ain't going to be able to pick them up, but I digress. So the investigators believed that the person wanted people to think that the wall fell on her, because all those stones were from a wall that was right near her. And each time she was brought in for questioning, she repeatedly denied that she had anything to do with it, that she was completely innocent, and they just didn't believe her. Now, obviously, the investigators were unconvinced that, like, they believed hardcore that she was guilty. And they obviously carried Hannah to Eunice's house. Now, this is when they charged her with the actual murder. Apparently, she burst into tears and confessed that she killed her, saying that she could be forgiven. She would never do so again. I mean, obviously, still hearsay. This is what so many years later, so we really don't know. Now, this confession was accepted as a truth in court when she was on trial. And this also helped with the prosecution's point of that it indicated she wanted revenge on Eunice because Eunice complained of her in the strawberry time for taking away her strawberries. Their strawberries, oh my goodness, fighting over fruit. And when Hannah saw Eunice walking to school alone, the body to make people think that a wall fell upon her and killed her. The whole thing is really baffling to me. And even, like, if you saw what they printed on the Norwich packet for the day of her execution, like, yeah, I believe it's the day of her execution. Yeah, it's the day of her execution. It literally says, sermon preached at New London, December 20th, 1786, occasioned by the execution of Hannah Ocuish, a mulatto girl, aged 12 years and 9 months. Now, that should put it into more perspective, seeing as how they literally printed mulatto girl. Reverend Henry Channing, which I already mentioned him, he visited her many times in prison and urged her to repent so that her soul would be spared. And on the day of her execution, he gave a giant sermon so everybody would basically listen and kind of understand. Maybe I'm hoping that they kind of understood, or maybe they just had such a hard grudge against her. So, and also to advise them as parents to understand that Hannah's an example of what could happen if parents did not raise their children. Well, doesn't that sound familiar to this day and age? Parents need to raise their children. So, he also stated that her crimes were natural consequences of too good parental indulgence. So, going back to her mother's drunkenness, and that the appetites and passions unrestrained in childhood can become a furious endeavor in youth and ensure dishonor, disease, and death. So, whatever has transpired has now resulted in these. So ultimately, Hannah was found guilty and she was executed by hanging. And her body is laying to rest in Ledyard, Connecticut. Now, obviously, this is a very controversial case, and it's not the only one. Like, I also found another case, and this is in 1885, and it was a young Cherokee boy. And he was hanged for committing robbery and murder. and he was only 10. And then we have even like more current ones, like Fortune Ferguson, who's 13, or George Stinney of South Carolina in 1944. He was 14, and they were both executed, and they were African American. So another theme of it's not a white person, it's somebody of a different color. They're mulatto, they're Cherokee, so they're Native American or they're African American. And my whole point of this case is also bringing the fact that if you didn't know, 2005, the Supreme Court abolished the death penalty for criminals who committed their crimes as juveniles. Now, if they were sentenced to death and when they are not charged as an adult, that is repealed. And I believe that it would be commuted to like a life sentence, or they would probably send them to like a juvenile detention center and then base it on to like after they turn 18, what will happen, things like that. And obviously that in itself, abolishing the death penalty for criminals who committed their crimes as juveniles, that's already controversial enough. And when they voted on it, the court was split 5-4. That's how hardcore the deliberation was about it. I've found a lot of other executions of slaves being like having the finger pointed at them for doing a crime that they may or may not have committed. There's a lot of them, and it's extremely disheartening. It ultimately I feel awful for these people because we don't really know if they did commit these crimes or if they were wrongly killed because of crimes that they like may have committed. You know what I mean? So I hope with you listening to this that it gives you some insight with how severely disturbing people can be and understanding what somebody's actions led to for repercussions. So I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you did, hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe. Now I'm also on TikTok at Creating Crime Time. I'm also on Instagram. My handle is AtlasAustin19. And I will see you guys in my next episode. Bye, you guys.